gets a goal? Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello everyone, I hope you had a good double game week. We're back live on Wednesday evening after double game week has almost ended. There's still a game going on in the background, but injuries mean it's less relevant. Rather than the weekend as previously advised, my work has postponed, so we're back to chat with all the info, pretty much luckily. Here's to digest what's happened with me over the last week or so. Is Sam, fresh or not, from watching his beloved Saints lose 2-1 last night, unfortunately. You're right, mate.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that one up. I'm absolutely fine. Outside of that, at least I got to see my brother. We always go down 3-4 times a season, have a couple of drinks, watch Saints usually lose. Although this season we had a bit more optimism. But yeah, still good fun nonetheless. Hopefully we can right a few wrongs against Millwall this weekend. But yeah, we're not here to talk about Southampton, as I've been warned by you several times. So we're here to talk about FPL, of course. And in doing so, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, Contemplate will be about loading up for the doubles. So obviously, in this case, a mid-season double, which carries a lot of promise with two of the biggest teams having those doubles, but following blanks, throwing up strategic problems. How do we balance the urge to buy in lots of doublers versus onward team balance? So big Contemplate section there to talk about today. After that, of course, we'll have bold claims as always and game week preview, which is a slightly new format, although I'm going to probably stop saying that in the next couple of weeks because it is now a permanent fixture covering all of the big questions plus any listener queries as we look ahead to the next game week and beyond. It is the Monday, the 21st of Feb. Liverpool-Luton is going on in the background. It is actually half-time, I believe, and 1-0 to Luton currently. Injuries for Darwin and Jota mean it's completely irrelevant for me, although I was quite glad to see the Liverpool clean sheet go before half-time. Doughty in play for you, though, Tom, so you've still got cause for optimism.
He's just had the yellow card.
It's
Wednesday as well, not Monday.
Wednesday, yeah, God.
Yeah,
what's
Wednesday.
Wrong with me?
I know. Middle of the week already. It's Doughty McDoubtface with his yellow card, unfortunately, which I guess sort of to move to scores on the doors sort of sums up this game week to some extent. I mean, it's not been terrible, really, has it? But there's been kind of frustration on loads of levels. The doubler's not really coming through for a lot of people versus the likes of Watkins, Solanke, Saka, all returning double digits. And that's something that we're going to talk about and contemplate in a little bit. I did own Watkins and Saka and didn't really remove either of them. So that was good. But yeah, here I sit with 84 points plus whatever Doughty gets me, probably I guess one more to give me 85. But I did make the move in the end. I did sell Ake. I did buy Ake and I sold Burn, and that meant I played him over White. Ake obviously didn't play last night, and so that's 4 points down because White got a clean sheet. Also, as we discussed last week, play Palmer over Gordon for another 6 points down. So I'm 10 points down from two decisions that I've made this week without even taking a hit. But I'm okay with it. Seriously, you can't say I'm okay with it without sounding like you're not okay with it. But I honestly, I am. And even that sounds like I'm protesting too much. But yeah, no, a decent enough week. Obviously, a bit frustrating to see both Darwin and Jota succumb to injury within the first half of the first game of the game week. Enjoyed watching that with the guys at FPL Meets. A shout out to them. They're a really kind of good day. Evening, all of it all together. But overall, sat on a decentish green arrow, I guess. Again, overall, 11% rise up from 385k to 340ish k. And obviously, Haaland triple captain did get a goal in the end. But I mean, 15 shots, Sam, 2.44 xg. James from Planet FPL said that it was his highest individual xg in a game without scoring versus Chelsea. So, I mean, we'll talk about it again in a minute, but you can't really complain too much other than the fact that you didn't get the outcome we wanted. So yeah, here I am again, a small kind of green arrow, and looking forward to what happens next week while being slightly regretful. I know it's fully hindsight about what happened this week. What about you?
Yeah, well, going into tonight, we're on the same score, so 84 points, although mine is all out because Darwin and Diogo Jota are not fit to play today, unfortunately. A game week that was full of a lot of promise, and I saw as like a big mover going in. I was set up with triple Liverpool and 2 City, thinking I can bring in the 3rd City and still roll a transfer. What really transpired was replacing Trent with Ake for a net 2 points. I did roll the other one, which is the marginal benefit I got, meaning I've got 2 free transfers for next week. But obviously, same as you, Jota and Darwin going off injured very early on was unfortunate, although at least they got a return each before that happened. And they were always going to be sells for me in game week 26 anyway. So really, it just impacted their immediate points in game week 25. So yeah, it wasn't the big moving double game week that I thought it could be. And
yeah, definitely.
Perhaps a little bit disappointing, but at least he got something, and I don't think there was anything wrong with the decision. I think it's just outcome sometimes doesn't favour you, and yeah, obviously massive advantage now to Solanke triple captainers or those who have held onto the chip for another later date. But at the very least, 10 points is okay. It's not a disaster. It's not Sadio Mane 4 or 5 seasons ago going off after 10 minutes with a 1-pointer. That hurts. So I will take anything more than that in any triple captain usage. So yeah, I'm not going to get too upset about it. It might be a grey arrow. It might be a small green or a small red, depending on what goes on tonight. But I think... Pardon?
Really?
Yeah, I think so. So it basically it did depend on the Liverpool clean sheet I was going to.
Oh, right. Fair.
So that was about 60% EO against me.
Really?
That's gone now. So yeah, amalgamated, I think it was. So that's gone now. So less of a worry. Obviously, if Doughty gets something big, or if Van Dijk, I think at 20% EO himself, were to get some sort of massive header from a corner and 3 bonus, then I could maybe be on a grey / a small red, but hopefully it should stay green. I'm pretty optimistic now.
Yeah, no, fair play. Oh, well, there we go. Right. So I think this week we kind of decided when we were thinking about what we're going to talk about for contemplate the first half of the pod. We're obviously throwing around talking about blank planning and things like that, but definitely feels like one for next week. Obviously, we'll have the results from over the weekend, and we'll be kind of moving into the time when we're going to be getting the information in terms of the FA Cup results, which will be kind of next week after we podded with guest FPL Sim. But we'll discuss kind of those plans in more depth then, and maybe come back at some point next week potentially, just to discuss kind of where we now stand in kind of a shorter thing. So this week, I think, just kind of reflecting a lot of the down feeling, I suppose, about double game weeks at the moment, I think it's worth kind of having a bit of a contemplate about outcome bias and double game weeks. It was a bit of a damp squib, honestly, double game week 25, and certainly there was a lot of people kind of saying, oh, you know what, I had so much hope for this double game week, and it's kind of not gone anywhere. People recalling bad doubles in the past, saved a little bit by Haaland scoring, of course, but as I mentioned, those high scoring single game weekers were sold by many. And there was lots of pain out there, especially when Darwin went off kind of at half time, with Watkins kind of returning 12 points, I think it was, with the brace against Fulham. So we're going to have a quick discussion on doubles, just to maybe digest what we've experienced this game week. How are you feeling about it all, Sam? As you said earlier on, it was just a bit of a disappointment, I think. And despite getting kind of greenish arrows for quite a lot, especially if you triple captain, it does feel like it's kind of tinged with that sense of what could have been.
Yeah, I think knowing that Liverpool and Man City, 2 of the most exciting attacking teams, had double game weeks and double game weeks of good fixtures as well, I think we all had good reason to be excited. It also wasn't one of those end of season double game weeks where there's nothing really riding on it. Both teams will be highly charged and motivated to put out their strongest 11, give full 90s to the players that they want to go out and win the games. So there was good reason to be excited. And sometimes, I guess, despite all that excitement, the perfect storm occurs, and 2 of the most popular assets going in were injured immediately. And actually, even before that as well, normally Liverpool double game week, you're looking at the likes of Salah and Trent nailed on, and both of them looked like either heavy doubts or completely ruled out in Trent's case as well. So I think even moving into it, there was some cause for concern, but still enough chips on the table, moving away from FPL chips in this case, but enough options to look at that made it good reason to be excited. Obviously, that all evaporated within about 45 minutes of the Liverpool game. And then obviously, again, Haaland that evening not scoring kind of just put the extra nail in the coffin. But at the end of the day, it's still a higher average score this game week than it is most single game weeks. So there are more points on the table this week than most. It's just it hasn't quite hit the heights of the double game weeks that have gone into FPL folklore of 150 pointers, which I think, knowing that a chip was going to be used this week as well, for most of us, some of us would have been thinking, yeah, okay, 120 plus, this could be a big one and a big mover. And it just hasn't occurred like that. And you know what? Sometimes that happens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely this kind of, I guess, I'm not sure whether we can really call it a pro template, but I think we're going to kind of artificially label it such for the purposes of this pod. There's definitely this kind of, I guess, reactionary feeling that next time I won't lean into the doubles too much. And I guess reflecting on what we said last week about, trying to make sure you temper it. And from our own experience this week, I mean, me in particular, not, I guess, falling prey to the FOMO a little bit and thinking, yeah, you know what, if we have a Man City defender doing what defenders have historically done double game weeks in those sort of game weeks that you mentioned, Sam, that have gone down in folklore, I didn't want to miss out on that again, like I did in the past with not only John Stones nor Ruben Diaz that week, or like Laporte as well in the past. So that's kind of what kind of in the end kind of made me think I'm going to buy Ake, and it obviously does sting a little bit, even if you are sort of hindsighting or not. And certainly, I suppose there should always be this reminder, right, Sam, that even though this double game didn't go very well, we shouldn't be thinking that all double game weeks are therefore going to be damp squibs like the one that we just saw. Like, they're so important, aren't they, in terms of our sort of overall outcomes in FPL?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is the temptation to kind of label them all, and after one bad one, especially as this season, this was the first big one as well. So we've got quite short memories in FPL, I think, and looking back, you might easily tar them all with the same brush because it's been a while since we had another one to look at. I know Luton had one earlier on this season, but I'm not really counting that as a big double game week. But yeah, I think it is easy to kind of go down that rabbit hole, but generally speaking, they are big in our seasons, and writing them off completely as if they're not important would be silly, I think, personally, in my planning, because there are always more points on the table in double game weeks. At least they're on offer. Whether or not you actually cash those points in is a whole different matter. But having good players, especially in this one, with potentially 180 minutes rather than 90, means that obviously there are more points to be captured. I think one example that I'd like to just quickly highlight with this week in particular, Foden obviously blanked twice. And normally that would be very annoying, 2 point, 3 point if with the clean sheet. But in a double game week, even if he's blanked twice, that's still 5 points this week. I think he got the clean sheet in the second one. So 5 points would normally be, okay, an assist. It's not great, but in a single game week, you probably take that. If he does 5 points every week over a 38 game week season, he's near 200 points. And for his price, that's pretty decent value. So again, I think even if you don't get the big points from some of these players and they do disappoint you, generally speaking, just having these players in covers you off from some really big reds. Obviously, there are always examples this week in particular of the single game weekers outperforming some of the double game weekers, but the odds of that happening in a double game week are clearly going to be lower than they would be in any other game week. So I think you've got to play those odds and continue to do so if you want to be successful.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't be kind of too down on this. And it really sort of leads out of, I've mentioned it already, kind of outcome bias or resulting in behavioral science. I've spoken a few times about this in the past. A good friend of mine, Alan, sent me a podcast on it when I was in Australia. And it kind of reminded me of what I heard there. Basically, kind of this whole sort of idea of resulting, I learned about it on this podcast anyway. I remember the host, I forget his name actually, it was Barry something, Sozbaz, but he was interviewing, you mentioned chips on the table, Sam, Poker World Series or whatever it's called, winner Annie Duke. And she was talking about how your decision-making process is prone to fall prey from resulting, which is mistaking good outcome for good decision-making process. And she used some experience from her past, but I'll use one from mine instead. Still in poker. So one time when I was young, I was playing poker with my friends. Nick was playing, and it was nearing the end of the game. I played well, but I had a few beers. I was getting a bit bored, to be honest. And I decided, screw it. I'll go all in. And I had an unpaired offsuit in my hand, something like that. So I had a two of hearts, 7 of clubs, and on the flop, turn, and river, it was 2, 2, and 7, and I ended up with a full house, and I won the whole pot. And there's an instinct from that. Which grew in me. And I was thinking, okay, in the future, I'll go for it because this experience has shown me that I can win on that eventuality. But what do you think happens 99 times out of 100? And what did I do next time this situation presents itself? Well, I also went all in again. And obviously I lost and had to go off to the loser's sofa and chill out and drink beer, which was quite fun. But everyone else was playing on, so it was a bit lonely. Clearly, this is a really sort of extreme example of this, but it's a good case study of this sort of idea because I'd taken the outcome as a cue for my decision-making process to be all good, when in fact it wasn't. The outcome and decision-making process were in no way in cahoots. There was no link between the two, but I'd erroneously made that decision. Applying that to FPL, so say you swing for the fences all the time, random captains, random transfers in and stuff like that. You'd of course sometimes get this right, and you see this at the start of the season all the time. All these people like, what are you doing captaining Granit Xhaka when he gets 2 assists, or what time traveller has captained this defender who scored a brace of headers this week, a Kurt Zuma or something. Outcomes do sometimes favour you, but often these people get a hell of a lot wrong too, versus the more straightforward crowd picks. And I think there's definitely this sort of semblance that you can fall prey to mistakes around repetition of a bad process.
Yeah.
If you mistake the odd good outcome for a good process, which can block off making good decisions, and ultimately, we see people like that who do kind of thrash around, I guess, with all the moves they make, donkeying in poker terms, who often do really well at the start of the season. You never hear from them again after October or November. And to pivot
when you're winning.
Exactly. And to pivot to this discussion, think about double game weeks more broadly, the value on offer from double game weeks is clear. It's an old cliche, but you get 2 bites of the cherry, as you were kind of inferring, and it increases your chance of getting good outcome as long as you have a rigid, or at least sort of good enough process for who you're removing. And I think it'd be a mistake to outcome bias this double as a reason for why double game weeks are worthless, they're overrated, net bad. And I think the focus should always be on the decision-making process rather than the outcome. So I was among the first savers on this pod many years ago, and it's a bit old hat now, but think to myself, I always try to think to myself, I don't think, was the decision right? I often try to think, am I happy with the process to get to the decision I made? That helps you rationalize outcomes as well as giving you some peace of mind versus the eternal torment of having point swings and points on our bench and all the other sorts of rubbish that variance throws at you. So yeah, I think it's just something to be wary of really when it comes to stuff like this. Just cool down for a bit, but the next double is going to be as important as this one was. It's just not really worked out here. And I suppose kind of to link to that, Sam, double game weeks, I think, in terms of achieving our goals for the season, do remain sort of probably the most important thing to plan around, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely, they do. And especially in this season now, a lot of the chip strategy and decision making that we're going to be applying to the rest of the season will weigh very heavily on the blank game weeks in the next couple of weeks, of course. And then also the double game weeks, 28 is the one that's confirmed, but we also have 34 and 37 very, very likely to be relatively large double game weeks as well. And not only that, but also very different teams seem to be the ones that have the double game weeks in those 2 weeks in particular. So planning for that rather than just taking it week by week and hoping you end up on a good team by that point is going to be really important, especially if you want to navigate both of them. And again, navigating that with chips will be extremely helpful to ensure that you are well set up for them. But that obviously there is a contemplate side to this as well. And I don't want to just disregard the benefit of very good single game week players. I think I sent you a voice note either today, this morning, or yesterday, talking about how the single game week players in game week 34 might not be the worst thing either. If you look at some of the fixtures on the table that week, if I were to apply the same logic from this week, or the decision making from this week, where a lot of managers would have sold Watkins or Saka or Solanke, for instance, in game week 34, I think we could also be faced with a similar issue, because a lot of good players in decent teams are looking like they've got a single game week, or will have a single game week if the schedule goes as planned, but decent fixtures where there's a lot of like but ifs as to whether or not they would be worse options than some of the doublers who are actually looking like weaker teams just happen to double. So careful decision making and applying a good process to each individual decision about which player will be better that week, whether it's a single game week player or not, is going to be really important. So having a balanced view on things and weighing it up based on the expected points, I guess, is the easiest way of doing it that week, will be really important.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, and we'll have a better picture of it very soon.
Of course.
But having that balance is going to be key, isn't it? And as you mentioned, a few of the fixtures, depending on how our teams sort of look at that point, just to read off a few of them: Aston Villa versus Bournemouth. I'm sure Watkins is going to stay in many teams. Fulham versus Liverpool. I'm sure Salah's going to be back in our teams. Spurs versus Man City. Wolves, Arsenal. It may well be, even if you are planning to free hit that week, that you still build a team around players you already own, which in and of itself may make you think, you know what, okay, I can get there with taking a couple of taking a hit on the week, or maybe kind of building up for a couple of weeks. You might be able to kind of do something else with the strategy, because the single game week fixture is so good for players that we trust at the moment, which is obviously a massive kind of theme that runs through this season. Yeah, I mean, it kind of all comes back to the central point that you shouldn't expect the next set of doubles to be as bad as this one has been. And you shouldn't kind of let outcome bias. You shouldn't also let kind of things like availability heuristic, which is remembering the most sort of easily accessible memory, influence or cloud your judgment. As you said, people hark back to the really good doubles from the past, 2016-17. Nick and I are both scoring 180 plus points with that bench boost. That was the week where people got kind of 200 points plus. Harry Kane scoring 4 against Leicester, it's always Leicester, and things like that, and Alexis Sanchez going off. I mean, those sorts of things are the kind of always the touchstone of our memories when it comes to doubles and things like that. Nowadays, it's kind of a bit more tempered, I think, and you have kind of less wild things or less wild picks out there in the ether. But still, it's really important to not get sort of bogged down in this, I suppose. So I think the Proton Plate idea that you should kind of temper your expectations around doubles, I can kind of get on board with that to some extent, but I still think that it's more important to remember how important doubles are just for your kind of long-term sort of goals to be met. And I think that's something that we'll kind of delve into, especially past game week 30, once this sort of initial sequence leading up to blank game week 29 is out of the way. Okay, anything else to say on this one, Sam?
No, not particularly. I think maybe just as a final point, if you're cursing your luck this game week, don't worry. We've got a whole nother load of rubbish to contend with next week. So pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and we'll go again. And hopefully this next section will help you set up for blank game week 26 as well, because they do come thick and fast, and we've got to pick ourselves up quickly if we've had a bad one.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay. So let's move on to bold claims. Shout out to listener Scott Forrest, who's absolutely killing it, by the way. He's in the top 1K. He said to us last week, "Hey guys, love listening to your pod, but bold claims needs to be revisited as it's not so bold. Over 3.5 goals in the Spurs game was over 50% chance was the bookies, and not really an out there pick. So a little bit of motivation, I think, Sam, and a little bit of recalibration is needed here. I think I do agree with Scott. Maybe we'd started to kind of look to score points over sticking to the spirit of what this section was all about with some of our claims in the past. It's still 6-5 to me, but I think we should probably try to I guess reel it back in and try to make sure that we are being bold, not mild, with the picks that we come up with. So last week, still in play this one, but Man City and Liverpool to score 12 plus goals to double was yours.
Yeah, miles off. It's not going to happen. We're 54 minutes into the Liverpool game now. They still haven't scored. I don't. Are they even going to get halfway there? How many is it now? Not anywhere near, basically.
No.
So yeah, I think they're on 7 combined, possibly. So yeah, we're miles off. That's not happening, barring some sort of late miracle from Liverpool.
6, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's going to be quite thrashing towards the end. Mo Salah coming off the bench versus Crystal Palace sort of level of
yeah,
outcome
without those
there.
players as well.
I know. I can't really see that happening. It's probably the best chance Luton are ever going to get to score points to get a result at Liverpool. All right. And I went for centre back being the highest scorer this week. I just kind of, as I said, pivoting off previous experiences. No, it's currently Simon Adingra, who's the highest scoring player this week. We'll question my own later on. Cool. So how are we going to address Scott's points here, Sam, in terms of trying to make sure we're not being too safe with our picks?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm starting us off, and I think this is fairly bold. Haaland will be captaincy shout for a lot of managers this week, but he goes up against Bournemouth away from home. There's another striker on penalties in that game that I'm backing him to outscore Haaland. Solanke, I reckon, will. Well, I don't reckon it will happen. I just think it's a fairly nice bold claim. It could happen, and considering he's very likely to be one of my transfers in this week, kind of got something on this one as well. So Solanke to outscore Haaland would be my bold claim.
Fair play. Speaking of transfers in this week, there's a goal. Speaking of transfers in this week, it's Liverpool. I've gone for Hwang to blank versus Sheffield United. And I think that Scott's point, this is going to be something which is against the bookies. I suspect they probably got decent odds on Hwang to score, decent odds on that to happen. So I've got that feeling that he's looking like it's not quite happened yet. The momentum isn't quite behind him right now. Oh, that's a Van Dijk goal, Sam.
Is it actually?
It is, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, damn.
This pod's aging poorly already.
Poor them. But yes, I think that probably will be okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, the blank isn't just for the goal, is it? It's also for the assist. So he just needs to return, basically, to disprove this. So, I think that is fairly bold. I think you're okay on this one.
Yeah, I hope so. Hope that meets approval. We shall see. All right. Well, that's very disappointing. Let's move on to looking at the key issues for the next week ahead as part of this section. And there's 3. So setting up for blank game week 26. So kind of overlooked, I think. This is a bit of a blank. We'll speak about that in a little bit. Who do we captain? Which I think is kind of a bit of a defunct section, but still worth discussing. And do we bring in blank game week 29 friendly players or prioritize the immediate in terms of what we know now, of course? Let's take the first one. So setting up for blank 26. Obviously, quite a few questions this week, narrowly looking at this as well. In terms of the state of play, I think that the engaged community obviously are all across this. But Liverpool, Luton, Spurs and Chelsea all blank this week. So there's a big sell-off of a lot of their players. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the questions really that were received were all about the midfield. What we do there. FPL fail. John said, what are the best 5 to 6.5 million mids? He picks out Matoma, Neto, Garnacho, Hwang, Trossard and Bailey. Tom Campbell and Jimmy the Claret ask any love for Adingra. And Dave says at FPL says, talk me out of a Wolves midfielder and talk me into one as well. And it's 2-1 to Liverpool.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah. Interesting one there. Lots likely as well to have Jota injured. And I originally kind of put this pod as being kind of the wolf versus the villain, Sam. But there's definitely sort of a wider discussion, I suppose, to be had in all these sort of cheap midfielders right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are almost 2 different pathways you can take with the midfielders right now. One is obviously with 29 in mind. There are certain teams with decent midfielders that could be on the menu this week. A few of them do have good fixtures this week as well. And then there's also the other side of the coin, which is, okay, I'm not going to worry about game week 29. I don't need a player that necessarily plays in that week. But what I am trying to do is prioritize the next few weeks, and obviously this week in particular. That's why, if you're watching on YouTube, Hwang Hee-chan and Pedro Neto have made themselves present on this on this screen, and those two are looking like they're going to be fairly popular, with Sheffield United at home this week, followed by Newcastle next week, I believe. And then I think it's Fulham at home in game week 28 as well. So it's a good trio of fixtures for Wolves. Obviously not the most consistent of teams in the world, but they are looking decent this season, and some good data for the two midfielders I've already mentioned. Outside of that, though, we've also got other midfielders as well. Obviously, the Villa boys will be popular for those of us trying to avoid a free hit in game week 29. So Douglas Luiz and Leon Bailey will both be high in mind for quite a few of us looking to do that. And then there are sort of edge pieces like Kudus, Bowen, perhaps at West Ham, who don't blank in 29. Or again, much like on the Wolves side of things, Brighton look very likely to blank in game week 29. However, Adingra, Gross as well could be really interesting. So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting discussion point as to which strategy, which pathway you want to take with the midfielders this week, because it kind of puts you down a route that you're not necessarily fully committing to, but you are walking down that path, and it will take some pretty big doubling back to get out of the situation unless some sort of cup out upsets happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think even though we haven't got the full data or the full information for 29, it's certainly worth, as you kind of touch on, having some semblance of a plan in mind for how you're going to get there, knowing what you know now. And I guess you can hope that Leeds bail you out, and especially if you own lots of Arsenal players, and that game's can go ahead. But we simply don't know what that is yet. And certainly, most apart from Douglas Luiz and Bailey, and potentially if you're looking at slightly out of the price bracket, but Kudus, etc. Kudos, I think it is, isn't it? And all of the players that we've kind of mentioned: Adingra, Matoma, Neto, Garnacho, Hwang, Trossard, and Bailey. Not Bailey, but the other guys all kind of fit into that category of playing for a team where I suppose you're weighing up. The fixture's been quite good at the moment for these teams, and you don't want to be leaving points at the table potentially in favour of the kind of the overarching aim to populate your team for game week 29. And to what extent do you either take hits, so you kind of incur a slight sort of deficit to try to chase those points, or kind of, I guess, as I mentioned, rob yourself in game week 29. I don't know. I've just to sort of say where I am at the moment with all of this. I think 26 is the last week that we don't have any kind of information, really, because by game 27 we'll know a bit more. But this week, I think I want to have one foot in both camps, because Solanke's definitely coming in for me. Definitely coming for you as well, as you mentioned earlier on. Got Jota and Darwin, Solanke in for Darwin. I think that just makes sense. A double game at 28 coming up. What I'm planning to do is I'm planning to adopt what I'm going to call a -4x4 strategy, which basically encompasses making a couple of transfers every week up to game week 29, incurring -4s, yada yada. Yes, I know the negatives of all that, but the idea is to focus on the week in front of me while also building towards game week 29. So how I do that is look at the fixtures and try to bring in players who ideally are 29 friendly, but also, not miss out on double game weeks. So double game week on 28, or miss out on, I guess, points in service of trying to get a player for 29. So this week, for example, the question I was really thinking about in my mind was Hwang or Neto versus bringing in Douglas Luiz or Bailey.
Same here.
My feeling on Douglas Luiz versus Bailey, and feel free to pick me up on this later, Sam, was that although Bailey's kind of online data is great, I really need the body in 29. Like, really need that player to be on the pitch. So I'd slightly favour Douglas Luiz, who was still kind of producing decent enough underlying numbers. So that would have been where I'd gone. But I really bought Hwang, the Sheffield United game, and I think that kind of is just one that's, I'm hoping people talk themselves out of it, basically, and kind of get worried about 29 and leave that. Friend of the pod, Pete FPL MF Doom, had a look at Hwang versus Neto. So Neto is the other one potentially on the table. And he pointed out that the FPL points per match are really, really similar. So Neto's 5.0, Hwang is on 4.9, non-pen XGI per 90, Hwang's on 0.5, Neto's 0.53, Hwang slightly more goal orientated as you'd expect, so 0.37 versus 0.23 if you kind of cut into those per 90 scores. Hwang overperforming on his XG, much like his countryman Song Min, 6.3 to 10 goals scored, and we think on penalties, perhaps even more so now with Cunha injured. So I felt like, with Sheffield United coming up next, that was one that I want to kind of lean into a little bit and just take the opportunity. Going forward, I don't know if he's going to last for particularly long. He may even go out straight away for Son in 27, who I think that most of us can be trying to get to. But I think that's kind of where I'm landing right now, Sam. And I think you're kind of close to following suit, aren't you? Because it does feel like being not overly aggressive, but having a tempered sense of aggression, as I mentioned with my kind of -4x4 strategy. I'll talk through the rest of it at the end of the pod. That kind of feels like the right way to play this, doesn't it? Maybe, am I wrong?
Well, I think there are two different arguments for it, and I've got a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other at the moment, telling me, or pulling me one way and the other. The cautious manager in me is saying, right, I'll make two moves this week. One will clearly be Solanke in for Darwin. I think that just makes the most sense in the world right now. We'll come onto a striker section later, but it does make sense in my situation. Then it's, do I want to start setting up for the blank in game week 29? And I'm pretty confident if I was to do that, then Douglas Luiz would be my answer. I completely agree with you on Bailey. The data is great. He has started 10 of the last 12, but I always just get the feeling he's never a million miles away from a bad performance and then getting maybe rotated out for a week. And then also equally, he does usually get taken off 60, 70 minutes in. It's not been quite so often recently, but he is still liable to that. There are other options that can play in that position. So again, if you're looking for the XGI per 90 for Bailey, it kind of isn't that relevant. You want to take that down to almost like an XGI per 70 or something. Whereas with Douglas Luiz, you are actually getting the 90 minutes every week and pens and set pieces. So I think if I was to go down that route, it would be Douglas Luiz. However, as you hinted at a minute ago, I am pretty sure I want to kind of throw caution to the wind. The devil on my shoulder is winning at the moment, and I do want to pile in on Hwang Hee-chan. I think the three fixtures that I would want him for over the next 3 game weeks are fantastic. I think he pays off the potential extra hit I might need to take by the time I get to game week 29 to field 9 rather than 8. And even at that point, that's a decision I can make whether or not the extra hit pays off at that moment. And again, that's all on the assumption that no upsets happen in the cup. And as I discussed with you earlier, even the most likely scenario for the cup results is in itself unlikely as a combination. So I'll just bring up Ben Krellin's fantastic tweet earlier about this. There's actually only a 1.5% chance of 6 teams playing in game week 29. That's obviously 3 fixtures going ahead. That's the current situation. There's a 38.4% chance of 8 teams playing. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, that doesn't tell us which that extra fixture will be. That could be the Luton Nottingham Forest fixture. It could be one of the other ones as well. The Man United one being the second most likely, but that's including all of the combinations. After that, we're getting into 12, 14, 16 teams. And if you play that all through, there's actually not one particular combination that's anywhere near 25% likely in isolation. So with that in mind, I'm kind of hedging my bets a little bit and throwing caution to the wind, knowing that something unlikely is likely to happen, if that makes any sense. So I'm just going to play this week on its own merits, probably be bringing in Hwang Hee-chan and actually maybe taking a -4 to look at a defensive transfer, which I'll come on to as well. And just playing playing the game in front of me rather than trying to map it out too far in advance with limited information.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm kind of landing at the moment. I don't know if you want to discuss the merits of Neto versus Hwang any further, but I am firmly in the camp of Hwang, and personally I think Neto playing as well as he is just means that it makes Hwang a better asset because he's getting better service from the wide areas from Neto.
Yeah, you want the goal scorer, don't you?
I do, yeah.
That's probably about it, and that's kind of how you maximise your chances, I suppose, of ensuring that. Obviously there's kind of the routes to points, etc., etc. But I think the case for Hwang in terms of the XG, penalty numbers being weighted towards goals, the penalties, these things, especially in a very, very short window of time, those are the things that you look at, especially if you're trying to get a hit repaid. I think that's kind of a bit of an open and shut case on that. Elsewhere then, Sam, so you've spoken about eloquently about Douglas Luiz versus Bailey. I agree with you that if you looked at the X per 70, then obviously be buying Bailey, but I don't know, I think that there's definitely a bit of a but about that, and obviously Douglas Luiz has penalties as well, which muddies the water further. Tom Campbell and Jimmy the Claret mentioned the Dingra. John mentioned Batoma. Brighton's fixtures over the next few. We should probably maybe even throw Pascal Gross in there as well, who's performing ridiculously well. It's not a 3-1 Liverpool. Probably that's another Van Dijk goal, isn't it? Let's face it.
Probably.
They've got Everton next, and then Fulham and Nottingham Forest. So 3 good fixtures still. What do you make of those guys?
Yeah, I like them. I think at the moment, Pascal Gross is quite tempting. Decent fixtures up to game week 29. Obviously, you'd have to, much like with Wolves, kind of throw aside the chances of them playing in 29, more so with Brighton, because it's far less likely they have that fixture going ahead, because it's very likely that either Brighton or Man City do progress. Obviously playing each other in game week 29, and then I believe they've got a tough fixture after in game week 30 as well, although I can't remember off the top of my head what you might have just said there. So generally speaking, with Brighton, I think out of the 3, I'd probably favour Gross at the moment, but I do like the upside of Mitoma and Adingra. I just think I'd probably go with the safety pick of Gross, given the fact that he is an absolute bonus points monster at the moment. If he does anything, he's looking at another 1 or 2 bonus points minimum, it seems. So, yeah, I would be more than happy to recommend him. And probably as a secondary option, Adingra for the price would be quite nice.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. High, obviously, on winning the African Cup of Nations. I think he plays a very nice role, doesn't he? Especially if you kind of want money. If you are, for example, free hitting in 29, and you're looking for a route to bring in Salah for the Nottingham Forest game in 27, then Adingra from Jota looks like it could be a very kind of nice little transfer to make. I think he's definitely the cheapest on the slate of players that we're talking about here. There's Garnacho as well, Sam, who's obviously quite a cheap asset to also kind of bear in mind. And United's fixtures too are pretty damn good, aren't they, for the short term? Obviously, it's Man City in 27, which is a bit annoying. But around that, you've got Fulham at home and Everton at home in 26 and 28. And you've also got Sheffield United at home in 29 if things transpire in a certain way in the cup results. So another one potentially could do a job for you, basically. But for me, I suppose, answering Dave CZ FPL's question, I think at the moment, a mixture of fixtures, as we've cited, even the Newcastle game in 27, like Newcastle's defensive data is something to behold, really. Like 4th worst for HTC, Sam, worse than Burnley.
I want to attack that fixture 100%.
So there's definitely something in that, even though they're away, and obviously they're missing Cunha now, so they're going to have to kind of slightly adjust. I saw a really interesting article in the Athletic earlier on about how Sarabia is now being used in kind of a drifting role, and Neto's being used kind of as the primary sort of outlet on the left. So they'll reconfigure again, Wolves. Gary O'Neill seems to be a lot more clever than he was given credit for prior to his appearance on MNF. And now, over the next 3, I'm more than happy to back that. And hey, if the if kind of everything combines and they happen to have Bournemouth in 29, they're happy days, really. I'll see what kind of happens going forwards. I don't know how long Kwang's going to last, because I could well end up removing him straight away for countryman Son in 27, to be honest with you. But we will see. It may well be kind of Gordon who goes then. But yeah, there's definitely other things to think about there, because Newcastle themselves have a very, very good back end of the season, as James from Planet reminded me earlier on today. I was listening to his pod, so yeah, quite a lot to discuss. It's open, but I'd probably be favouring the Wolf over the Villain at the moment, despite the fact that there's, at the moment, as far as we know, a material benefit in terms of buying in a Villain. That's for sure. Elsewhere, Darwin, Sam, removing Darwin is going to be on the slate for loads of people. If you've got Darwin, is it simply a no-brainer to go for Solanke? I think there is obviously one player, and we have referenced it a few times over the last few weeks. One player who's clearly putting his hand up, who is Hojland. One of those players who are maybe overlooking because of blanking. He's tracking his XG as a non-penalty at the moment, 6.5 versus 7 goals scored. United are middling to attack, but improving. And yeah, decent fixtures again, as I mentioned earlier on, in terms of Garnacho. Very good at using his chest. Another Manchester based striker who's good at using his chest to score goals. But yeah, I mean, I think it's very difficult to look past Solanke, though, isn't it, here?
Yeah, I think if you want to literally just focus on this game week, then Hojland's the obvious pick. But we're not focusing just on this week, unless you're planning on wildcarding in game week 27, which I think is a strategy some people are employing. Then you're probably looking at Solanke, because after this week's out of the way, and you never know, he could do something against Man City. He is on pens. They will have a few breakaway chances. So it could happen. Obviously, Hojland's more likely this week. But after that, Burnley away, double of Sheffield United and Luton. I think just getting that sorted ahead of time will be a really easy move in both of our situations. And I think it just makes a lot of sense before the price just starts to skyrocket as well, because more and more people will buy him next week ahead of Burnley. And then even more people will be buying him the following week after that for the double. Hojland will be there. He'll be a factor. And I think he will do well this week and probably for the next few. But for now, I'm happy to just wait and see. I think there's 3 strikers that I'd just about place ahead of him, considering mapping out the trajectory. So yeah, I'm happy enough to let him score his points in the background and hopefully not hurt me too much for the next few weeks.
Most important player this week, Sam.
Yeah, 160, 170k or something, right?
Yeah, certainly. And we're talking about in midfields, not overlooking the likes of Hwang, Neto, etc., etc. I think it is literally a case of that old adage: there's not enough room at the inn. Not because we don't want there to be. It's because literally, in terms of the the limitations of the game we're playing, there's no way of getting him in, because it's very hard to look past. I can't see a case of removing Watkins. We've spoken about that. If you have removed Watkins, Nottingham Forest and Luton next 2, and then Spurs in 28, and a listless West Ham in 29. None of those games worry me.
Yeah,
it's very, apart from basically wanting to differentiate, which I can completely understand and accept, because Watkins' EO is just going to be through the roof, basically an irrelevant player in your team. I can completely understand why you'd be going against that to kind of chase the upside, but I'm not 100% sure that I've got the cojones to, basically. Next one's Haaland and then Solanke. And it's very hard to make the case for where Haaland fits in there. It really is. I mean, maybe even, after this week for Haaland, you may be thinking, you know what, I'm going to take Haaland in, because Man City, 27, Man United, well, Haaland versus Man United, that's a worrying kind of proposition to go against. And then 28 versus Liverpool, likely blank 29, Arsenal in 30. I mean, if United do get to 29, Sam, there are going to be people maybe who go there for Hojland, right? And especially if they've got a game in 29, it's going to be a real sort of tempter, isn't it, for us who own Haaland to not think, can we get his little brother Hojland? Surely that's going to come on the table. Just spitballing a little bit now.
Yeah, I think if Man United do get the Game Week 29 fixture, which obviously we'll know soon enough, it is unlikely, but all they need to do is lose to Forest in the Cup, which is by no means impossible. Then I could definitely see a lot of managers wanting to get to Hojland in Game Week 29. Obviously, great fixture. And we will quite likely have two strikers that don't play that week. Solanke is unlikely to play, and Haaland is obviously unlikely to play. So there could be a double swap on the cards there for Tony, who has Burnley, and Hojland. And then maybe bringing in an extra Spurs midfielder or something as well and go really aggressive with it. Obviously, anyone free hitting is laughing at that point because you can just triple up on Spurs. You've got all of those bases covered without having to take any hits as well. But yeah, I think for the time being, we're just going to have to wait and see what the FA Cup results are before being able to recommend Hojland. But basically, because until Game Week 29, there are three clear strikers that you probably want ahead of him at the moment, in my view, anyway.
Yeah, it's close, isn't it? It really is close. But there we go with that one. And finally, just to cover off positions, I suppose, defenders. Porro is still undergoing quite a few sales. We're both kind of keeping hold. But last week, for example, there was a net sell-off. Over almost a million people, managers, that sold him off, of which I assume half would be bots. Who would you buy in now? I simply don't know. So Mikel's algorithm, for example, has all defenders as a negative, basically saying just don't bother making defensive substitutions. I suppose if you haven't got double Arsenal defence, Sam, though, like someone here doesn't,
Oi, oi.
yeah, you might be looking at someone like Gabriel.
You might well be, yeah. Yeah, he will be very tempting. I am, like I mentioned earlier, potentially looking at a -4, just writing a few wrongs all at once because I think hits will be flying anyway. I mean, I can kind of cover it a little bit, or shield it a little bit. And I mean, Gabriel and Saliba as a defensive double up does look pretty tempting at the moment. I think Gabriel's still at a fantastic price. If I'm not trying to get too far ahead of myself and pre-plan 29 too much, then I think it makes all the sense in the world to go Gabriel. Other options do exist, though. So Pau Torres, obviously, will have the fixture in Game Week 29. Decent fixtures until then. Almost no attacking upside, but who knows? He might get something. And then also Regulon as well, potentially, and will have the game in 29 as well confirmed. So those are possibilities, but looking around, they just don't inspire me, Tom. And Gabriel, I think, is always good for a goal. And I want to chase that upside, especially in a team that is by far and away the best defense in the league at the moment. They are looking so tight at the back that it's not just I'm hoping for an attacking return from a defender, which seems to be the case all across the board this season. With them, I'm actually hoping and expecting clean sheets every other game. So I think it probably pays itself off. And despite the fact that it probably means I'm sacrificing an extra player or taking an extra hit for Game Week 29 if I don't free hit that week, I think it's still worth it overall. I want to chase the points available to me in the next 3 weeks. And even Newcastle at home, I'm not that worried about it. Arsenal have been that good. And then straight after that, more good fixtures for them. So yeah, if you don't have a defensive double up, and especially don't have Gabriel at this point, I would definitely be looking at him first and then trying to decide how important it is that you cover off extra single game weekers for 29 second.
Ahead of the curve, buying Benny Blanco and Saliba. Yes, you're completely right. It's absolutely outrageous. Our XGC at the moment, 18, which is 5.7 less than Man City, which works out at kind of 0.7 XG conceded per game, which is obviously ridiculous. I think it's just us and Man City who are below 1 right now. So yeah, quite the defense there. I agree. I think Pau Torres maybe one that I'd be thinking of bringing in at some point. A decent kind of 29 for any defender. I think that in 28 West Ham have got Burnley at home, so maybe one to think about. Burnley's fixtures are actually oddly all right.
No.
So Charlie Taylor owners have great fun. Will have a great time.
Yeah.
Do not buy any Burnley defenders. So obviously, we know if you're Charlie Taylor owner and you need him this week versus Palace, fine, whatever.
Yeah. I do have him, so I don't need to sell a defender to have full defense. But I think, even though it's Palace, I actually still don't want to play him.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, it is very whatever. You're likely to get 1 point, and to be honest, if he comes off the bench, you're probably he's probably odds on to outscore the rest of the team, the rest of the defenders with his one. So there you go. How many players this week do you think is all right? Obviously, it's not a huge blank. Would you be happy with 10, or would you kind of go for either making a transfer or taking a hit? If so, or is it all sort of dependent?
It's such a cliche. I hate saying it, but it is dependent. It's covering the important ones. That's always the most important thing. And I think Baker has been saying it on Above Average for weeks now that if you're requiring a hit to bring in an 11th player, and that 11th player happens to be a defender with limited attacking upside, then and not even that great a fixture this week, then just don't bother. Like, the expected points from that defender is probably below 4. So that's probably not going to pay off. So in that specific scenario, I probably wouldn't bother. I think having 10 is probably okay. I think a lot of weeks there's 1 or 2 players in our starting 11s that get 1 pointers, 0 pointers. So we're effectively playing with basically 10 anyway. I don't think it's a massive issue as long as you've covered off the most important players to have. I think what is a kind of an important thing to note at this juncture, though, is that there are a lot of players injured, out, no fixture in the midfield or attack. And I think there are prime candidates to replace those players that I would expect to pay off hits this week. So Hwang in the midfield being one of them, even Douglas Luiz as well. If you wanted to go on the safer route, I would expect over 4 points to pay itself off if you wanted to get out 11 for a hit. Same up front as well. I think even Solanke, especially because it's future planning as well, I think you make that move anyway and use the fact that you're getting to 11 players as an extra excuse to do it. I think it more applies to, okay, I've got a full front 7 of attackers. That's fine. And then am I taking a hit to bring in an extra defender if you've already got Gabriel, for instance? I think he might be the one exception to the rule there. And that's, again, getting myself out of jail before I tie myself up in knots there a bit. But I think generally speaking, there aren't too many defenders out there at the moment that I would back to be getting over 4 points and therefore covering off a hit to get out 11. I think playing 10 more often than not, if you're playing 10 with 2 defenders rather than 3, I think it's probably okay.
Yeah, no, fair play. All right, and best captain for the week ahead.
Yeah, so I think no surprises who the favourite will be for a lot of managers. Haaland obviously didn't blank in the double, so he won't be completely out of favour for everyone. Bournemouth away from home, it's a good fixture. I think I checked earlier and he's got almost exactly half his returns this season away from home. So 8 goals, 3 assists, I believe, so far. So it's not like he's way worse away from home at the moment. I think there is an argument to say that he doesn't get a lot of big hauls, like multiple goal hauls away from home, but he'll still trundle along pretty well. And that might just be a quirk of the statistics. So he'll be very popular. But the other one I've decided to put up on the graphic is Saka. And I actually really quite fancy it. I think Saka this week at home to Newcastle could be fantastic, especially if they persevere with playing BDB down his flank. I could see Saka having some joy there.
Oh, as I said earlier on, he's just worrying.
It's so bad. It's so bad. And Arsenal's is so good. They're blowing teams out the water.
XG's better than City's.
Yeah.
So could there be an argument for Saka
at home as well?
Effective ownership, I guess. Playing tonight as well against Porto.
Yeah,
I don't know. EO wise, I suppose if it's worrying, isn't it? Always with Haaland. I mean, it's yes, he didn't do loads of goals, but the underlying data was obviously where it was. So I don't know. I think
although Saka's isn't bad though, 0.82 XGI per 90 for a midfielder is pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, whatever inhalers were taken in Dubai seem to have helped an awful lot. But yeah, I suspect it's all going to be on Haaland, and that's just I'm tempted to just do. I almost definitely will just do that and enjoy the fact that there's going to be gains probably across the board everywhere else. This whole section's probably.
Well, we don't have to spend long on it, do we?
Next week though, Sam, when Saka's got Sheffield United and Haaland does Man United, there's definitely more of a discussion about it. There's definitely more to think about.
Didn't Saka blank or get 1 assist against Sheffield United in a 5-0 win earlier on in the season? Or am I misremembering that?
No, you're right. He did get an assist. It's game week 10, I think. Something like that. But that was in the down period for him in general.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, that could be really interesting. I think, Saka would be probably the second favourite, but Haaland annoyingly is the clear favourite. Or maybe not annoyingly, if you like playing the EO game and you want gains off of all of your starting 11, then maybe that's a good thing. So yeah, probably not the worst thing in the world.
No, probably not. 4-1 Liverpool, Sam. Doughty's been subbed, and he's been subbed off injured potentially as well. So
really?
That's more annoying for me.
Sorry, man, that sucks.
That's all right. I'm not relying on him at any point up until game week 28, after which I'm going to be like, oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah, we'll see. Harvey Elliott has scored, fortunately.
Fine.
But Van Dijk's done this damage. I think I was on a safety score was 4, and now it's kind of gone down to 2. I'm 2 ahead of it now, but it's a 10% green arrow has been reduced to 5% green arrow. Them's the breaks always around this sort of time. Shall we just talk about our teams quickly to end? I know we've only been gone and done an hour, but I'm happy with that. I feel like we've kind of covered it off quite nicely, especially because it is quite a bit of a tiding over sort of week to come.
Yeah, I think so. And next week will be a big one. Obviously, we might even have to do a 2-parter with the FA Cup results as well. So let's wrap it up with our teams and what our transfer plans are moving into game week 26. You're first, by the way.
Yep, that's fine. So Hwang has already come in, came in for Jota. There was a moment on Tuesday where a couple of the price rise and price changes sites had Jota dropping, and that would have lost me 0.2 million in value.
I think they do tonight as well.
So I kind of thought I'd just get in there and avert that eventuality. My worth kind of discussion this, so we've got a bit extra time. But I've got what might be tantamount to a pathological fear, Sam, about my team value being rubbish. I've already started looking at what game week 30 wildcards are going to look like, because fitting in Son, Salah, Haaland, Watkins, am I forgetting anyone?
Saka,
right?
And maybe Trippier you mentioned as well.
Fitting all of those players in is already getting mighty difficult for me. And I've seen a couple of people, a couple of friends in DM groups whose TV is much higher than mine, kind of throwing out kind of game week 30 wildcards. But I can with all these players in, and still kind of decent extra pieces around the side. And mine is just nowhere near that at the moment. And my concern is we'll get to game week 30 and I'll be absolutely screwed. I'm going to have to make one. I'll have to make 1 or 2 concessions, I suppose. I'm already kind of thinking it may end up like a 3-5-2, where most people are going to have Solanke, Haaland, and Watkins, because Solanke's kind of game fixture game 30 onwards are pretty decent. I'm probably going to have to kind of get Gordon or something like that, get him back if I do sell him indeed, for around that period. Or something like that, and it's already looking a bit dodgy. So I went a little bit early with the Hwang move. Solanke's going to come in for Darwin. Obviously, was waiting out to see what would happen now. Might as well wait until the press conferences now as well. But that's sort of where I am, and the whole idea going forward is that -4x4 strategy that I mentioned. So this week, Hwang and Solanke in, see what happens with the FA Cup. So then we get the 29 idea. 27, it feels like Son should come in for that. I think that Son, Watkins, and Tony will be the big 3 really for 29 as it stands. So someone will come in then. I'll either move one of Hwang or Gordon for that. maybe bring in 29 friend defender for Ake. So that's the -4. And they've got Luton then, who famously don't do any goals. I'm not sure about that one. In 28, Foden and Gordon going out for Tavernier. He's got double game week, and Kudus, who's got Burnley at home. So 2 decent chances to score points. And then 29, Solanke to Tony, and then one more, which will take me up to kind of 8 or 9, depending on what the hell is going on with Doughty. Need to find out what's happening there. But that's the idea, as I mentioned earlier, to be sort of vaguely aggressive whilst being 29 friendly. Happy to do that. Throw a bit of caution to the wind, as it were. Obviously within the scope of being quite a boring, templatey sort of thing. Well, I've only got one clone in the top million, so I'm not that boring, it seems. That's probably just due to owning Ben White, to be perfectly honest with you. But yeah, there we go. So Hwang and Solanke in, captain in Haaland. What do you think about sort of overall strategy, Sam? No, really.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about it a little bit privately, and I do like it. I think it's something that I'm tempted to kind of instill a little bit myself, which is take each game on its own merit, attack what's in front of you in a period where quite a considerable amount of managers are probably going to go quite defensive and look at just piling in on players that definitely play in game week 29. Whereas, like I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of banking on at least one upset somewhere to happen, or some combination of fixtures that we're not necessarily expecting to happen. For example, if that Chelsea Leeds game goes the wrong way, or the Leeds way, then all of a sudden you're laughing for game week 29. You don't even need to worry. No hits will be required. Be very similar for me. And I think just attacking the fixtures ahead of us right now, especially in your case, makes a lot of sense. And bringing in Solanke is just wise. I think bringing in Hwang Hee-chan as well. I think you're tackling the upside of this week with a differential. He will remain a differential as well. I can't see him, even in the more engaged community, being above like 20-25% EO this week. So yeah, I like it a lot. Go on the aggressive, tackle the weeks as they come, and then figure out at a later date with the information that we've got what to do next. I think that's absolutely fine at this point.
And turning attention to what I kind of buried it a little bit, but thinking about wildcards already. I saw Ben Crellin earlier on was saying that there's like a small chance that he does wildcard a little bit earlier, especially because once we know the information next week, there may be a way to construct a path to get through 29 and still sort of, obviously free hit in 34 and the bench boost in 37. I just can't, I don't know, I can't help it, Sam. I can't help but look at the fixture, the fixtures, the players, my team value, and put together that sort of prototype wildcard. Ben says he's 35% likely to wildcard in 27, 30, 20, 28 versus 40% likely to wildcard in 30, 31. So it's definitely something that people are thinking about. Ben's obviously a really, really good FPL player as well. That's something that potentially could happen for me, especially if I am confident that I'm going to be able to create a strategy surrounding getting through 29, while also, I guess, securing the players I want to secure going forward. But it's going to be kind of quite a hefty ask, of course, with likes of Salah, Haaland, blanking in 29. So it's going to be a little bit of kind of jiggery pokery required. But if I can find a way of doing it, especially if next week's results are kind of kind, which I don't really want. I want there to be absolute chaos. Let me just be plain. I do not want Chelsea and Arsenal to be able to have a game in 29. As much as it'd be useful to me, it'd be more useful to everybody else. I don't want that. But it's definitely something that kind of is in mind for me. Am I just being an idiot? Am I just kind of pathologically being worried about my bank balance or something like that?
Well, if we're bringing this back to the amount of budget you've got, I really don't think you're in that much of a weak position. I think, as I was saying to you again privately, you might be a little bit down on the average of like the really engaged managers, but generally speaking, I think you're maybe 0.5 off at most, and that's one downgrade somewhere. And you listed off all of those really important players to have and how it's going to be difficult for you to get them in. making one downgrade, Trippier to Shah, as one example, is probably something everyone else is going to have to do anyway, because even if they've got a team value of 0.5 or maybe even 1 million more than you, they still don't have the value to get all the way up from a Shah to a Trippier. So I still think no matter who you are, some sacrifices aren't required. And there does seem to usually be a cheaper option elsewhere that ends up being the reason that you climb the ranks really quickly come the end of the season. So yeah, I wouldn't lose hope too much, but I do understand that budget does matter, and going early could ensure that you get the exact team you do want. However, I wouldn't use that as the one decision, the one like factor in when to wildcard. I pick when to wildcard based on everything else, and then try to work out the most optimal time to use the budget to my advantage, and the best way of doing so in that week.
Yeah, it's certainly something that I'm considering. I do think I know there's obviously people that I respect and think are very very good FPL managers like FPL Fran who have gone this week. I do think next week would be the time when I'd be looking at it, especially towards the tail end of next week, and it's definitely not off the table. We'll talk about that with Sim a little bit, I think, next week as well.
Definitely.
But I mean, there could be definitely some possible gains there. But we are kind of talking about, getting my own version of your sexy spreadsheet. Really burying myself into FPL.team, and I suppose it's something that we'll kind of pick up again going forward. But it's certainly something in mind. But yeah, this week, Hwang, Solanke, both coming in. I think that's absolutely fine. Should get to 11. Ake not playing. Hopefully, Akanji had a really good game, annoyingly, at nominal left back. I think it's more kind of in a free while Walker goes forward. Hopefully that means he plays against Old Club Bournemouth and hopefully rewards us, Sam, with a goal. How are you looking for the week ahead? You've got those 2 transfers again, and you can make one transfer, can't you, here, and then roll it?
Oh, I could if I really wanted to. That would be the ultimate baller move. I would love it if I could do that, but I'm not going to. I don't think I can. I think there are too many risks, even though they are players with fixtures. So I could theoretically make one move, whether that's Darwin out for Solanke or Jota out for Hwang or Douglas Luiz, and roll the other and technically have an 11. But Taylor hasn't started the game yet since coming back. He will probably get minutes, and I do back him to start, but it's Burnley, so that's a 1-pointer. Ake, like you said, is hopefully going to start, but is now probably a slight risk. And more importantly than Ake, I've got Estupiñán as well, and that is a serious concern. Again, it baffles me that he's not in their strongest 11 at the moment, but I think even some Brighton fans last year were saying he's a very good FPL player, but not necessarily a great footballer. And that does worry me a little bit, that is what some Brighton fans think, and they obviously see him week in, week out. So that does concern me that maybe there is something more than just bringing him out for a little bit of a rest going on there. And it also is quite telling that Lamptey went off and he wasn't the first player to come on. So again, I think he's an issue that I just need to sort. Otherwise, every single week, that's going to be a question. And I think the sooner I do it, the more likely it is that hit pays off. And because I've got a really obvious defender at his price point that I can bring in with good fixtures in the next 3, I think it just makes sense to do that. So Gabriel in for Estupiñán would be the hit part, I suppose you'd call it. And the other 2 would be the same as you. Hwang in for Jota and Solanke in for Darwin. And then that would give me a full playing 11 with 1 bench. And that would be Taylor against Crystal Palace away from home. And then if for whatever reason Ake doesn't play, or maybe a random Foden rotation or something crazy happens, as it always does in FPL, then I've just got that little bit of cover. And I think because so many people are taking the hit this week anyway, getting out of the way for me this week now and bringing in 3 players that I do have a lot of faith in over the next 3 game weeks, I think it's worth it. And I think I just go on the attack this week.
Like it. Shackles off for pricey. Yeah. And yeah, all of that makes sense. And I think it's definitely a bit of a running sore, I think, Estepinian. And as you've kind of seen with my travails thus far this season with the likes of Martinelli, as I was saying to you privately, I think it's definitely worth, if you do spot a possible opportunity just to right that wrong, even if it is a -4, sometimes it is worth just taking that opportunity,
Rip the
because
plaster off.
certainly, I know that avoiding hits is always going to be the be all and end all for a lot of people, and I completely respect that point of view. But psychologically, it's actually quite nice to remove a player like that. Actually, you think, you know what, I can just move on now. I don't have to worry about this anymore.
Especially when there's such an obvious replacement as well. Like Gabriel's just been phenomenal recently. I just not having him in my team hurts me every single week. So yeah, I think it just makes sense.
Cool. Well, there we go.
I thought that was another goal alarm then for a second.
No. That was me elbowing my my microphone box, which then impacts on a wok. So there you go.
Fantastic. Well, I think that wraps us up for this week. A little bit shorter, but I think we're saving all of our extra energy up for next week, where we could even potentially be doing 2 episodes. We've got FPL Sim on as well, which I'm really looking forward to. That's going to be a lot of fun. And hopefully we'll be enjoying another small, or maybe larger than this week, Green Arrow come game week 27 prep. In the meantime, though, thank you all so much for listening. We have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on X at WGTA_FPL, and you can find me at FPL Pricey on there. Instagram and Threads, we're WGTA.FPL, or again, I'm just FPL Pricey on there. So if you did enjoy the pod, please do consider following us on all of those channels. But also, if you could give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to it, that would be fantastic. And then finally, if you're one of those that watches us on YouTube, if you could leave a like, subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated as well.
Cool, perfect. Thanks very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the pod. We hope we assisted you in digesting the double that just was, and hopefully not dwelling too much on outcomes. We'll be back next Monday with all-round lad, FPL Sim, TikTok superstar. I'm really looking forward to that, having some bants. God, I feel I'm too old for saying stuff like that, but there we go. Yeah, it should be really good fun. And then I think that we'll see if we can find some time to come in again, at least maybe to update on our plans or something like that. Obviously, there are great podcasts out there like James at Planet FPL that I'd highly recommend you just go and listen to what he's got to say about chip strategy, things like that. We'll come back to give you our views and things like that on it as well. Other than that, have a good week, and we'll speak to you very, very soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?